Hey everybody, I'm going to share my screen right away because I'm the most excited about being able to share today's class with you, which is the How Journal technique. This is the quick recap. And one of my favorite techniques, you can always screenshot here. So when you're looking at what you want to know from class or remember, that's the fastest way to get through all of these slides. Now, when we do this in class or live, whether it's on Zoom as a group, it's 3 hours. So I'm going to be snip snap here to get it through in 20 minutes. Why do I teach journaling as a business strategist? Well, because it works. When I'm looking for a business owner to expand their thought process in a way that they can't quite reach to, it really helps to give them another tool. This is a unique tool. You can search it out. I don't know anybody else who's doing it because it is unique. And it's also one of the things that has made so many of the 50 businesses that I do strategy for successful, because writing in a journal or writing, things out really does give you clarity, understanding, and insight on how you're going to do it. We also are going to talk about some concepts that are around prosperity and what those things are that I teach. And specifically, that's going to be loving dominion of how do we come into this. So our goal is for everyone, when you come to class, is that you're going to have 10 polished how questions to take with you. So that's what all the group work is. That's why we put things on the board and work through them together. This is a perfect item for someone who has things that are unfinished, unresolved, unseen, or uncertain. Uncertain feels like, gosh, I kind of would like to do this thing, right? And how would that happen? So it's really different than just saying, hey, I'm going to manifest or I'm going to write a vision journal. This is really a tool to physically do the work. You can dream about a garden. I can wish a garden would show up, but the fact is that I've got to be able to figure out how to work in the garden. And that's the brilliance of a how journal, H-O-W. And it's not the how that's an acronym for AA. There's a different one there. But this is the how journal, right? How do I do it? And it is made to be able to work around in a constraint. So that's the key item out of this, is that we've got to squelch down the outcome to fit in a specific size box, and then your brain will do that. Today in class, we're going to do, hey, we're going to invite your brain to a specific action, right? How is the action? It's an invitational ask. Then we're going to let it kind of draw out its ideas. And then we're going to kind of start to build a map from there. For those of you who love art journaling, this is your jam. I share mine in class. We don't need to use our time up here, but it is a journal that I come back to over and over again, that I can settle in the ideas, that I can kind of work with it. But it is like a very much a working vision board, and it's there to expand your vision, but it's also there to help you dig through things that are a little under the surface, a little more complex, and things that really require not just a thought, but they need vision, voice, and leadership. And a how journal is the way to partner with those ideas. So a good how question is always going to start with that first line on here. And if you're going to snap a picture, this is the one. This is what is the guidepost. This is the 3x5 card you should be writing down for yourself. It's going to start with an invitational opening. How can I? How will I? How do I? Right? How? And then that conditional opening. It's invitational. And then you kind of go to this specific outcome. And then you add in the constraint. So you were asking it to have an invitational opening. How can I? And then we have a path forward in the direct ask. This is the thing I'm asking for. And then we have this other constraint. And that just tidies it all up in a nice little note. The next thing I have is our agenda. That's not particularly informative for you, but it is to say that this is always a safe environment. So when you're in class, I remind everyone, be thoughtful, be generous. We are there to do this as a loving dominion practice. And what that means is that we are generous guides towards the outcome of loving others with our best self. So we are really looking at, right? We are a generous guide that to the outcome of loving the other people with our best self. So sometimes that means you have to love yourself first. And that piece of loving dominion is critical when we're working with things that are a little touchy-feely. I learned how to do this because I was inspired out of Chris Voss's work that he is a hostage negotiator and really forced me to look at my questions differently. And as a business strategist, I had to look at my questions so that I could help other people grow because, right, I'm a knowledge worker. And, but what I am is a math geek. So we want that. So a good how question, they're concise, they're not wordy. How can I learn the mambo in 12 weeks? Boom. Then you just be quiet, let your mind figure it out, start to sketch out those ideas. It is in some ways that simple if you have a simple ask. Some of you have really complex questions to ask, so they're not quite that quick. The way that, so one, I want to show the working concept of how this is. And so I just gave one from my own journal, which was that I had put in this how of kind of a terrible question at first. So sometimes, you know, you're just gonna start and no one gets a great question right away, unless it's how do I mambo in 12 weeks, which you are welcome to take on. If you all start to mambo, that would be great. But how can I give my niece an Auntie Mickey inspired picture for her Vegas wedding, right? This was a terrible question, but it's really what I wanted to do, right? That I wanted, I use my lens to love people. I want to love the people in my family, but I knew that I wanted something really special because she waited a long time to get married, and they'd already raised their children when they chose to get married. So it was important for me to do something that only I could bring for her. And being the person that was in the room when she was born, this was a really big day for me, to watch her grow truly from her first breath to this day. And weddings are a big deal. And she was lovely. And it was a tough wedding because my father had just passed away. So and he was going to walk her down the aisle. So I really wanted to bring a new light. So there was my first round of the question. How can I do that? And what I had to learn when doing this technique is I had to learn to query my how question. So I had to ask it a little more questions so that I could really get to the root and get the best how question, so that my brain could easily recognize what I wanted as the outcome, that I could easily get to where I wanted to go. And, you know, we are complex people. So when you are querying questions, that's the biggest benefit you have of people being in class. That's the biggest benefit of why we want to do this up on the board with all of us, is that you can get this newer piece of self-reflection. When I went back, right, and looked at that question, right, how do I give an Auntie Mickey inspired item? What I had to really do is I had to query it again and go, oh, well, what does that mean? What is a Mickey inspired photograph? What are the emotions around that photograph that I want to show? And how could it be something that only Auntie could give? And so when I had that free write around just the query of the questions, I could start to get more clarity. And getting that clarity is really where we start to see loving dominion come in. This happens to be a picture. We were walking down, this is where I wanted my photo shoot, that I wanted this moment of them having their wedding picture on Fremont Avenue. And this random drunk guy comes up and hugs her because she looked like the Statue of Liberty to him. It was great. So I had to update my question, right? What I really had to find out was from the last lesson, from the last query is, oh, what is that Mickey inspired? It's playful and fun. And that is what I 100% of the time try to bring to all of the things that I do for my family is let's have a little fun together. Let's goof off a little bit. That, you know, sometimes we're all so serious, and my niece has a very twisted little sense of humor, so she will understand my style. So I had to update it, right? How can I photograph playful and fun for my niece's wedding? So it started with this 10-foot veil. My niece is 6'4" tall. So a regular cathedral length veil would just trip on her. So I had to order a 10-foot veil. And so I needed her to have this long Italian veil with her dress. And so I could also use it as a prop. And then I also wanted to play on the fact that her husband is so, you know, mucho macho, right? So we got to really look at when that how question comes in and it's really well worded, now the practical and the tactical can just start coming in, right? Oh, I'll get a veil. Oh, I want to play on just their magic between each other. And so that's when the practical and the tacticals get revealed, is in that free write, right? Rewriting the question, how can I photograph playful and fun in my niece's wedding, right? So I kind of sketched out the times or the things that I wanted. And this is them just goofing off, you know, play mad. They like to play mad. That Kendra has this look where she'll give him of, you know, I'm going to get you. So I'm allowing these new ideas on my query, but those query, when you start to ask them, now this is where loving dominion comes in, right? That we start to lead lovingly with vision, voice, and values. And we start kind of getting a clearer picture of the why. So then came another question for me, which was, I wanted to create a photograph style, a postcard style of something that would be hilarious, that would be a little more them. So I thought of the things that I wanted to take pictures of. We just went out there, but if I knew, because I knew I had a map made in my mind of Fremont Street. I knew what it looked like. I've been on that. I've played on that street before. It was easy. Now she just had to go be her bride self. So this was the first shot that I had, and I went, yeah, this isn't the timeless joy that I wanted to present. So I just turned around and asked him another question, and this became the picture that they liked the most as their item, right? Vision, voice, and values. Now this has the fun. This has the playfulness that I was wanting, and that would be something that we could all laugh, that you just even look at them and you want to laugh. So loving dominion, vision, values, voice, and how do you showcase that? So with my updated question, when I got to the wedding, it was easy to know how I wanted to pose them or how I wanted to just play with them on their day. And this is so that's easy to do in the moment, so that when you're ready to do something, having a great how question that you've already mapped out makes moments that are tight or have lots of intricacies, right? We had a whole family there, we had stuff there, and all the pictures that I wanted to highlight were just for the bride and groom. So there were lots of pictures of everyone at that wedding, and that wasn't my gift to her as the bride. My gift to her as the bride and to the groom is the Auntie Mickey love that's only for them. So in the pictures that we see, it's really only them. And having time with a bride on her wedding day, even in Vegas, is hard. So this ended up to be her favorite picture of the wedding. So I had to do a male version of that as well. Of, you know, how can we just enjoy, right? That they waited a long time to get married, that they dated for 20 years, that their child had already graduated from high school, that they bought a house, their son graduated from high school, and they got married all in 12 months. So for those of you who wait for things to happen for your kids, that, you know, give them time, they'll figure it out. So she just added it up all the way, right? How do I, right? How do I? And that's where that question is really understanding what is the question that you're asking and query it, right? So my updated question was, how do I photograph playful and fun for my niece's Las Vegas wedding. And that made it a lot easier. So when, again, right, what's the purpose of class today is we're going to ask your mind to take a directed question and take action on it. And then we're going to query it to make sure that it is the right question. And then we're going to allow it to map, and then we're going to let it map in that space of loving dominion, that I'm going to come from my most loved self, my most loving self, and I'm going to come to that from that place of vision, voice, and values. So the question has to be right on. So in class, we do a free write. So we do a 5-minute quick warm up. And this is the slide that I do. So you can just screenshot this. And that is, right, let's just do a warm up. And it's just, how do I get paid to blow bubbles on the weekends? Or you can pick one of these, right? So we just do a free write. We don't have you try to create, but we just do a quick free write. And this is, if you're going to screenshot, this is another picture of the same thing that I keep saying. It is the how question, is that simple action invitation at the very beginning. It's a defined ask, and it's a constraint. Those three things have to be together. What's fun about the word constraint, and this is so you can screenshot this as well, right? It is in a great how question, sometimes, this is why we do it on the board, this is why you come to live class, is that sometimes a constraint is that we're adding it or we're removing it. So a constraint can work both ways in the how journal. So it's a limitation or a restriction. It can be a rule or a boundary that determines how we do things. So we are going to look at that in general. So then when we go back to those questions, I remind people, here's, what's the constraint out of here? The constraint is July 4th weekend, or on TV, or on the weekend, right? So it's that constraint. Then we come back to the wedding recap, right? Here's another silly one that I did for them, just for silly memes. One of the time constraints that you guys are going to be using the most is a time constraint. And a time constraint you can use in more than one way. It can be an interval that's of the past, or it's in the future, or it can be like a really specific confined area, like a running score. So, but time constraints are really helpful in storytelling. So if you want to try to do this at home, this is the picture to take. This is the storytelling constraint that we gave to people so they could start to work in the constraint around time. This is another recap. We would have come back to class. You're getting the exact same slideshow that they do. But remember that when you're working on your how questions, your goal out of today is to really think of the questions first and then go to your journal and journal them. So if you have one that's already there, you can just go ahead and sketch it out. But most of us are really going, well, let me get 10 questions and then let me get digging into my journal. And long-winded questions are terrible. They will not only just confuse your mind, but it will confuse the response. And that's actually the issue with it. Not that you are having terrible etiquette in your grammar. It is because it will confuse the response. We are looking for a good question that is direct and actionable. Direct and actionable. So another picture, right? Here's another way that we can write that question. And now in the second part of our class, we're starting to get more available to digging into these deeper wells in the conversation. Because many of you will be using this technique for spiritual growth, for personal goals, for other things that are really valuable. So this is one where I go, okay, well, let's see what this one is, right? How do I show love and respect to my family in my everyday life, right? How can I, simple action, invitation, defined ask, right? Show love and respect to my family, and then my constraint. And then you're going to let it just start problem solving out in your journal. This one's from Ezekiel, who was in a class previous, right? He moved to Paris, and his apartment is the size of a bedroom. So he has a baby and he's got his dream job, and they were just looking for like, hey, I've got to be able to do things that are baby proof everywhere I go. And how can I grow herbs in this tiny apartment? So there's one simple way, right? It's a simple ask. And so it just allows your mind to play with it. It can banter it around, because that might be right. He swore in his, but this tiny apartment. Okay, well, it puts it into a constraint that's actually a double constraint, right? He's got a double constraint: baby proof, tiny, grow herbs. Right? How do I do this? The critical eye is also one that will reveal itself as you're doing this, that many people are going to write critical questions around their how, and what they have to be is non-critical. So you will instantly start triggering yourself. You'll instantly get into flight or fight. So you really have to, and this one says flight or flight. So fight or flight response, but you want a non-critical question, and we'll show you what that looks like in class. And a good question for you is there to build a greater outcome. So when I say to you, many of you are going to be utilizing this tool as something that you'll use for your own personal growth, this is a way to really delve into how a question can really be purposeful and brave. So use it in that way. You'll see that language from me a lot in this session. And remember, the session goal is for you to have 10 questions to take with you. That's the goal of coming to class live, because we're going to be doing these as group questions. And we're going to show you the areas in which we think we're going to do them. And this is where we throw them into the board. And many of you are business owners. Some of you are doing private work. Some of you are healers. Some of you are, digging out of poverty. That the people that come to class are really, really crazy wild in its group. So this is where we would have done it in class, is we would have said, here are your topics. These are also ways that we can talk about how this would apply to a business owner, right? A how practical question, right? So a how question will start to build the practical and the tactical. For those of you who are business owners, that's where we would have had you really focusing in. If you were using the how journal to build your business, we would have said, focus in on the how question, query that question, make sure it's the right question, and then allow it to free flow into the practical and the tactical. And that is really going to be the trick for you. The next question, right, is, right, how builds a tactical, like a roadmap, right? This is how we can do it, right? How can I make myself an ally with my customers would be a business one. How invites others to build with us, right? How can we as a couple work on the same goals? So sometimes you'll be using these in your relationships. You'll be using them in a variety of ways. We also use negative constraints as a query, because it is a way for your brain to kind of sort fact or fiction. Is something true or false? And so sometimes, a lot of times people are looking to overcome a negative constraint that is in their life. So a lot of times we'll just take a few minutes and start to look at the negative constraints that are in their lives. It may be that they just have cognitive overload, that they're feeling short on time, running, or resources. They may have some physical limitations. They may have an addiction, right? It's just to give people an opportunity to go, let me just sketch out some of my negative constraints around this. That buzzer is that I hit my 20 minutes, so I gotta get us through. So you're giving them this way to kind of brain map, right? So when I was writing the class myself, it was, right, and I was trying to brain map these practical and tactical ways of, right, how do I reduce distractions while I'm writing this class? And this class took me 2 years to build in my mind, and then it took weeks to put all the pictures and the stuff together. because I had to really think about how I would teach this. It's not just say, hey, here's what it is. It's how do I teach this? How do I inform people? How do I bring them through this process? So creating a class is time consuming. So for me, I had to ask that question, right? How do I reduce my distractions while I'm writing for this class? And one was, right, I had to lock the dog out of the room. You heard my timer. I live by that timer. Right, what to do, right? I have to do it when I'm not hungry. I have to do it in multiple steps. I have to give myself enough tools so that I can keep reworking it. So a how question is also going to open up the practical and the tactical. I keep reminding people purposeful and brave. This is a tool to really be purposeful and brave in your own personal work. And so when we look at sample questions, right, how does self-sabotage magnify my avoidance, right? This is kind of vague and it's kind of critical. So we have to kind of start to reword that. And so when we look at questions, you're going to query them. You're going to go, is there another way I could word this? And that's why you come to live class, is because you've got, you know, anywhere from 5 to 50 people that can help you in the chat box or live redo it. So we show examples in class around negative questions that really amplify the greater prosperity conversation, which is a poorly worded question that is negative in general is also a terrible place to be, because you can't be in survival and growth mentality at the same time. So I can't be a negative and positive at the same time. They will battle, and they will start to fight and fight and fight. So one of the reasons that you have to practice writing these questions and querying them and working with them as a group is because it's really easy to get trapped in questions that feel negative or that don't actually give you the leverage that you want because the question is done poorly. So here was one that we just redid, right? In healing, right? A how question can ask a direct questions to emotions that are under the surface. This is the magic of doing this for personal work, is that I can invite a question from an emotion that might be hiding. It's under the surface. I can't quite grab at it, but I can ask a question that will open the doorway for that body of information to come out. So how have my nighttime dreams in the last year positively informed me? Right now I'm shopping for growth outcomes and emotions that will align themselves to positively informing me. How can you positively inform me? Right, how has just dreaming positively informed me? So this is in healing questions. I really like this process. Another one is this one, right? How is being persistent and courageous given me the clarity to be a healer? And this will allow us to come into things that maybe are a little bit more marbled and washy-wishy, that are kind of more difficult to grab at, but it will allow us to pull them out in a positive way, which also helps us kind of strain out the other parts of that detail. So it is, right, that's the magic. And the magic for you is going to look a lot of different ways. So think about what you want out of your how journal. Do you want it to be inspiring? We want it to have lasting benefits. We want it to have progress. For those of you who love vision boards, you should be how journaling every single year, just like your vision boarding. You should be here every year. And that means I have to hold it every year, I guess. Right. So again, if you didn't take the screenshot before, I'm going to ask you to take it again. Right. This is the way it has to go. Otherwise it doesn't work. Right. And when you are looking at this from a leadership role and you're trying to get to some of these deeper questions, sometimes it is to be able to look at something from a power position. So when we are looking at, this is actually a question that we reworked out of trauma, right? How has wrestling with difficult emotional triggers made me a better leader? So it is a way for me to reflect on perhaps some emotional trauma in a way that allows me to come at that from a place of loving dominion, right? I will now lead with vision, voice, and partnership to find out, why has this benefited me? And now I don't have to go into fight or flight. I don't have to have an emotional trigger around it, because I already am identifying that these were already triggers, right? How did wrestling with them make me a better leader? And now it gives the triggers themselves, having happened in my life, a new role, right? As a beneficial partner. So when I say a good question, boy, they really are, because we want those ideas to be an invitation. So your brain will start to build a little roadmap. If you've ever tried to get into a door at night and you can't quite find where the key is or where that is, that you start to just feel your way through it, your brain does the same thing. Unfortunately, your brain is brilliant, so it just makes up a story of like, oh, maybe the key is gone. Oh, maybe you're on the wrong, you know, it just starts making up stuff. But the minute that you touch that little spot, that you know where the key goes and you know what your key feels like, now it doesn't matter if it's dark the rest of the way, because your brain has already mapped it out. If you can get into that house and you get that key in the door, it can get you to the light, right? And that's exactly what this does. It's an invitation to move, because it will give it the opportunity to build that map. And so when we're in class, again, we talked about practical and tactical. It is this invitation for the brain to go into worlds of new discovery. It gives it a safe way to think about new discovery. We talk about practical and tactical and loving dominion a lot in class, because it is so important and functional. Out of this, I'm going through just the final slides so that I can get my recap out, which is, 1, I'd like to see in class. 2, there's lots to this concept, but that one basic concept of 10 questions, get them worked out. Get your questions worked out first, and then bring them to the journal, and then start working on them. Pick 10 questions every year. You can do 10 questions every month if you want, but you want to be able to have them in a place where you can really start to take advantage of how your brain is going to build that map, and take advantage of using this as a tool of something that builds to something greater. That's really where it works the best. Okay, well, I thank you so much for the recap today. I will see you in class. And if you couldn't get there, well, I'm glad that you could watch the recap. And if you want to go to the next one, leave me a note and I'll put you on the next mailing list. Okay, bye.